So crap, rubbish and expensive IT from Microsoft that doesn't work.
The meeting is live, Leader.
Excellent. I'm glad to see we're able to state facts in this meeting as well about the very poor quality of Microsoft. So, ladies and gentlemen, hi, I'm Gerald Jackson, leader of the council. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. I'm very sorry that we're running late, but we had technical problems because of Microsoft Teams being such a poor program. But we will struggle on and see if we can fight through the IT. Thank you, people, for coming to this meeting, even though it is running slightly late. Members of the public are able to view this meeting, and written representations from members of the public have been submitted, and we'll get them when we get to those particular items. We're meeting virtually in response to limitations imposed on the governance of the council by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purposes of this meeting, the City Solicitor has advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, the meeting will be run in reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings Regulations 2020, number 392. Members are asked to keep their cameras on throughout the meeting and only turn your microphones on when you're coming to speak. Officers, please keep cameras off unless you're speaking, if that's at all possible. I'll now ask Cabinet members and others who are here to identify themselves. So first of all, we'll go through members of the Cabinet that I can see on my screen. Can we start with Councillor Steve Pitt? You're on mute, Steve.
Sorry, Councillor Steve Pitt, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Dave Ashmore.
Hello, I'm Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you. Lynn Stagg.
Hello, I'm Lynn Stagg. I'm the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation and Ward Councillor for Battens.
Thank you. Lee Hunt.
I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety.
Thank you. Matthew Winnington.
I'm Matthew Winnington, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Darren Sanders.
Thank you. I'm Darren Sanders. I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Susie Horton.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Susie Horton. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
Thank you. Hugh Mason.
Good afternoon. I'm Hugh Mason. I am Cabinet Member for Planning and City Regeneration, and I am the City Council Member for St Jude Ward.
Thank you. And finally, I think, to welcome Councillor Chris Atwell to his first meeting of the Cabinet. Chris?
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Okay. Thank you, folks. We've got a lot to get through. So if we quickly run through, Jane Dodino, are you there, Jane?
I am, yes.
Jane, my understanding is we have deputations from Claire Reedy, Cal Corkery, Judith Smythe and Mike Dobson. Is that correct?
Or that is correct. And Mr. Dobson, Mr. Dobson's deputation will be in writing and read out for you.
And colleagues, Jane, they're all in relation to the same item 8, is that correct?
I think Cal Corkery had another item as well. Was that correct, okay. Councillor Corkery?
Cal, is there another one?
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to speak on tip now as well, if that's okay.
Okay, fine. Okay, good. So does anybody else, any other councillors who wanted to speak on anything, please let me know. Speak now. No, okay. Let's run through things. So first of all, with no apologies for absence because we're all here. Secondly, declarations of interest. Colleagues, are there anybody with an interest to declare? Councillor Darren Sanders.
Yes, thanks, Gerald. I'm one of the member champions that is included under item 7. However, I don't think it affects my ability to vote on it because I agree with all the recommendations.
Well, I am as well. I don't think agreeing or not agreeing affects whether we have an interest or not. Whether we have an interest or not as champion in this is a legal thing. Mr. Balfe, would you like to advise whether people who are champions are able to? I'm sorry, I have a very loud 26-year-old cat in the background.
I don't have any problem with it.
Okay, thank you. Any other interest to declare? No. Okay. Record of previous decisions on the 15th of September. Colleagues, are you happy with the minutes of that meeting?
Great.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, can we move on to the Home Energy Support Service? Andrew Waggett. Welcome, Andrew, and thank you very much for your very helpful report. Would you like to introduce it, Andrew? Oh. And Andrew, are you there?
Apologies, Gerald. I think I've had some of the same issues with Teams as you're having. Where I've got authentication things coming up. Afternoon, everybody. I'm the Energy Services Team Manager at Portsmouth City Council, working within Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services. The paper that I'm presenting today talks to the increase in scope of the energy services that we offer as part of the City Council. But I thought I'd start by just giving you a quick bit of background about the energy services team and more generally, but then lead on to give you some general points about the paper if that's appropriate. So the energy services team, that title covers something of a multitude of sins. So we're responsible for anything that really happens regards energy within the council. So that's the procurement of utilities, right through to large capital projects related to energy efficiency and low carbon generation. Within the remit of the energy services team is a focus on fuel poverty mitigation. Now, fuel poverty affects perhaps as much as 12–13% of households in Portsmouth, where people have to make a decision between eating and heating. And over the years, over perhaps the last 2 or 3 years in particular, we've been extremely successful in attracting funding and increasing the outreach and scope of what we do with regards to fuel poverty mitigation. At the start of this year, we published a home and water energy efficiency strategy, the home energy and water efficiency strategy, which went through cabinet, which set in motion the groundwork for starting to increase those services, so that we were looking not just at that cohort of fuel poverty households in fuel poverty, but whilst not diminishing from the work that we do in fuel poverty, trying to treat the other 90% of the households in the city who don't necessarily suffer from that affordable warmth issue and dilemma. So what this paper really does is look to treat every household in the city and not just focus on those that are most likely or most vulnerable in terms of falling into fuel poverty, whilst not obviously taking away from the support and help that we give there. So, I mean, just broadly, the paper sets out a number of ways in which we will move to help every household in the city. So that includes advice and support, whether through media, comms, even right down to kind of bespoke solar modelling for households. It talks to the audit process that will need to be done for households to ensure that they're getting the right energy efficiency measure at the right time. So we want to intercept, and traditionally the market has been poor at looking at a whole house retrofit solution, and what we're trying to do is to try to through the Portsmouth City Council vector is to try to identify other measures that might be applicable at the same time. It also outlines the ability to harness the local market for installers through an approved local trader list, but also off the back of that to be able to develop some of the low carbon and energy efficiency skills that are going to be needed as we head towards net zero carbon, because, well, frankly, there's a dearth of skills in that space at the moment. And then finally, I suppose it recognises that it's all very fine and well putting that support underneath these mechanisms, but what's fundamentally needed in a lot of cases, the barrier is going to be funding. So it identifies a number of funding mechanisms, either grant funding in certain circumstances, harnessing things like the Green Homes grant scheme that's been published recently, but also talks about initiatives such as low cost financing as well to be explored. It's probably not a bad point to say actually. On page 6 of the report in point 9.2, we talk about the local authority delivery scheme, which is a spin out of the Green Homes grant scheme. At the point where we submitted the paper a week or so ago, we didn't actually know whether or not we've been successful in bidding for that funding. I can confirm that we have been successful in bidding for that funding. So we've won £3.1 million from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy for primarily for putting solid wall insulation into some of the hardest to treat homes in the city, where they can be up to fully funded. That around £2 million the capital funding will be spent in Portsmouth. And sort of watch this space a little bit in terms of how we launch that, because we've obviously had a quite short turnaround between being advised of that. One of the, fundamentally, what the paper does as well is we've set out the ways in which we think we can help, and the ways that we think that the city might benefit from a more holistic energy efficiency and microgeneration offer. But what we're going to do over the course of the next 2 to 3 months is really drill down into some of the business models and some of the business model effectively for doing that. And one of the recommendations in the report is to come back with in January and basically to present just how far along that journey we've gone within those 3 months. I think by way of an introduction, I think I don't have an awful lot else to say, unless you.
That's fine, Andrew. Don't talk unless we, just for the sake of it. So thank you very much, Andrew, for everything you and your team do. Colleagues, Andrew's team has been really successful about working through the council's building estate. So we've got now over 25,000 solar panels on council buildings and continue to increase that. And he's been very successful at working in homes, local authority housing homes. But I walk down my street and we've had our solar panels on our roof for 5 years. And I was surprised that no other house on our street had solar panels when it was when that would have been available to people. I tried to think of how we might be able to encourage people to address the climate emergency and try to reduce the amount of carbon pumping into the atmosphere. Andrew has said that if we, an average house, if we can put in a mixture of measures, insulation, solar panels, batteries, heat, a ground source heat pump and things like that, we're looking at being able to get maybe 2 tons of CO2 saved every year from going into the atmosphere per house in the city. Now we know there are 80 odd thousand homes in the city, and local authority homes are being worked on very well by Andrew's team. But there are 22,000 houses in the city that would benefit, because of the shape of their roofs and where they point, would benefit from solar panels. And yet we're nowhere near that. So what I'm hoping we could do is a system where people can ask the council for an independent energy audit of what they're doing and how they might be able to save energy and reduce their carbon footprint. And then for us to signpost people to local firms employing local labour, be able to put those things into their homes, and the council to help with either very low cost lending to be able to make sure that people can do this, and even lending where there's no upfront cost at all to the homeowner. I've talked to the Landlords Association, and they're very interested in this as well. So this potentially works for quite a lot of the housing within the private rented sector as well. So I think if we go down this route, the potential is that we've got an incredibly good story to tell, and we can make a real dent in the carbon produced in the city and get us to carbon neutral much quicker. Colleague, Councillor Dave Ashmore, this is in your portfolio. So David, do you want to go next? And then I've got Councillor Darren Sanders and Councillor Lee Hunt. So Dave Ashmore first.
Well, really, Lee, just building on what you've just said there about, how this is a positive story. This is a a journey that we've gone on, and the importance of our getting to net carbon neutral by 2030 to continue that. We've done. You're talking about the warmer homes. You're talking about the things we've done, like with the LED lighting, which has saved a ton of carbon there. So yeah, Andrew and his team there, a real credit to the council, the way that they've been going on about it. When we have briefings, it's a very complex thing to me to get into there, but Andrew's straight in there and his team know exactly what they're doing, and they've got all these positive things. Like you say about warmer homes, it's addressing carbon footprint there, carbon emissions, and I know it's concentrating on all homes in the city, but we are dealing with things like people in fuel poverty, which is a very real issue. As you say, people choosing between energy or eating. That's a very real issue with quite a significant amount of residents in the city. So yeah, really good and excellent work, Andrew, and the team officers, and just a really positive thing all round there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darren Sanders.
Thank you, Gerald. We've come a long way since 7 years ago. A council officer said, well, why don't we put some solar panels on some roofs? And since then, we've produced a nationally recognised, award-winning team of unsung heroes who've done an incredible amount to try and change people's approach to energy in the city, and I would argue more than any government-imposed clean air zone will ever do. And this ambitious plan builds on the work that's already been done that we've already agreed to try and deal with energy and water at home. And not just dealing with fuel poverty, but as Councillor Dave Ashmore has already said, trying to help everybody make sure we can all tackle the climate emergency together. There are two very, very good aspects for me as far as this is concerned. The first is the opportunity to have local green jobs. It's clear whatever emerges, whenever we emerge from the situation we're in, that we need a kinder, fairer and greener city, and we need a Green New Deal. And this actually takes us one step further towards that with local green jobs. And unlike things like Victory Energy, the people for giving local residents the opportunity to decide what is best for them rather than giving them something off the shelf. And also not spending millions of pounds on consultants and other things like that is also very, very helpful. So it's quite radical as a plan. It's very good as a plan. It builds on the work that we've done. And I also note the government's projected announcements today around offshore wind will sort everything out. Although offshore and onshore wind should have been done years ago, but have been held up by unambitious politicians. We also need to make sure individuals get it sorted as well. And I'm delighted to hear Gerald's enthusiasm for this because it's precisely the sort of people in precisely the sort of nicer areas of the city that we need to convince if we're going to deliver our climate emergency targets. And so
As you've pushed the mute button for your last few words, but we'll move on. Thank you. So we've got Lee Hunt next and then Matthew Bennington. Lee, where are you? Yes.
Yep, that's it. Been unmuted now. Thank you all very much indeed. And I'm thrilled and delighted to be part of an administration that is pushing forward on the greenest budget that this city has ever seen, with a view to reducing consumption, of improving our carbon emissions. What I really like about this, and it's so different to a previous model that we saw around VSEL before, is that this is a universal approach, a liberal and universal approach to reducing those carbon emissions. And it shows the advantage of being a group that is not hemmed in by dogma around a private company driving forward for profit. And we've seen the benefit already today by the announcement, but 3.1 million is going to be used to help reduce carbon by improving the insulation of people's homes here in Portsmouth. Members, that 3.1 million that's been won has already just about wiped out all the money wasted on VSEL so far. So that's an improvement that we have made in a universal way for the residents of Portsmouth. The leader of the council and indeed Councillor Ashmore have already talked about the monies that we're and the carbon that we're reducing by using LED lighting citywide. And I think if my memory serves me right, that in the first year of the programme, it saved £400,000 or thereabouts, and probably saving more because more lights have been introduced so far. Members, that's almost a 1%. That's almost equal to 1% on the council tax. It's a big number. It's a big number. So I'm really pleased that we're delivering on our promise to deliver the greenest budget ever for Portsmouth, and that we're addressing fuel poverty in the ways that were described by a very good officer team earlier on, looking to reducing domestic energy consumption and the resultant decrease in carbon emissions. So I'm very pleased we support the report today. Thank you very much indeed, Leader.
Thank you. Matthew Whittington.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo the comments and the sentiments of the previous speakers on this, and I'd like to thank Andrew and his team for all the work that's been done on this. It's been there's a huge amount of work going on. I know I've been having conversations ever since we came into administration about this in terms of looking, because of course the core of this isn't just about the practical gains in terms of more fuel efficient households. What does that mean? Actually, that means that people are in better households, better living conditions, and therefore their health and well-being is better because they're in a much better state. But also having an opportunity to have things around their own energy generation, energy consumption that they're making themselves. That is a really key part of it. I think that the other really important part of this as well is that we're talking about non-fuel poverty, households that don't live in fuel poverty, but that also includes a lot of privately rented households. And I think that the point about this is that this gives incentives for landlords of privately rented households where they haven't got householders in fuel poverty, but this also for privately owned households that might be privately rented in the future. And I think that's a really important point here. So if we need to include everyone in this, we need to give everyone incentives. The government are lagging behind, as Councillor Sanders has mentioned earlier on. They are moving in the right direction, but they're still way behind where we need to be. And we really need to get everyone on board, whether they're a council house tenant, whether they're a homeowner, whether they're people who are landlords of privately rented households. If we can get everyone involved in this and come up with different schemes that are appropriate for all those different people, that's really important. I'm really pleased to accept the recommendations of this report and really look forward to the rollout and continued work of Andrew's team at the council.
Okay. Councillor Hugh Mason is next, followed by Councillor Susie Horton.
Very briefly, Chairman, I think all of us would agree with the principles behind this, and there is one point which hasn't been brought out in the discussion this morning, which I think is important, which is that we are exploring routes to train the next generation of installers. We're looking to create 250 new jobs, and these are the type of jobs which our city needs. And so I think that it would be remiss of us not to note that as we go through.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Councillor Susie Horton.
Agree with most of what's been said. So just to add one other thing, which is the context at the moment. I think it couldn't be better timed. The way we're going to work in the future is going to be a lot more home working, and the way we live our lives for the foreseeable future is going to mean that we're in our houses. And I don't think we should ever underestimate the fact that people going to work and children going to school is for a lot of families was actually being able to survive in terms of paying their bills. So I do think we need to be really mindful of the impact of the current situation on fuel poverty. So very, very welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, colleagues, I think everybody's spoken in favour, colleagues. I think the rules say that in terms of voting, people need to say if they do not support the recommendations which in the papers. So, colleagues, is anybody opposed to the recommendations in the papers 1 to 6? No, in which case those are passed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Andrew. I think this is a really great project for the future of the city that will make an enormous difference in terms of the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, item 5, Treasury Management.
Thank you, Leader.
Are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Leader.
Have you got anything you need to add to the report?
Just one point to note, Leader, which is that this is a requirement of the councils to report on its treasury management activities throughout the year. It's a noting report. It has to go on to full council also for their information. And one thing to mention, I think, which is that the council remained within all of its treasury management limits and indicators throughout the year. Nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, anyone want to speak, or are we happy to accept the report? Councillor Hugh Mason.
Just a couple of questions to the officer for clarification. Page 4 of your report, you look at the HM Treasury, the Public Works Loans Board, and the changes which were introduced on the 11th of March, which seem to have reversed an earlier one. A flip-flop government, if ever there was one. Does this mean that Public Works Loans Boards are now, once again, the most efficient way of our borrowing money for major projects?
Hugh, by efficient, you mean cheap?
I mean efficient in terms of our treasury management.
I think that means cheap, Chris.
Well, they're certainly efficient because they're the organisation that can advance the monies quicker than any other organisation. There are some products being developed on the market which the council may take advantage of, and of course there's the launch of the UK Municipal Bonds Agency as well, which will be an option for the council in the future. But as we sit here today, it's the most efficient in terms of speed, but it may not be the most cost effective in the future, and we're keeping our options open.
Okay, thank you. Okay, colleagues, is everybody happy with this report? Anybody who does not agree with the proposal? No, thank you very much indeed, Chris. Moving on to item 6, EU settlement scheme, and this is Paddy May to introduce. Paddy, are you here?
I'm indeed, thank you, Leader. So in terms of what to add on this, I think the key point to emphasise is that 12,000 people have applied to the EU settlement scheme. That does appear to be the majority of relevant people within Portsmouth, but it's not entirely clear what the actual population of EU citizens is within Portsmouth. So I think it's still very important that we still promote the need for people to apply, both internally for the council's own workforce and also externally wider within the city, and working with colleagues in HR and comms to do that. And I think the other thing just to emphasise is the good partnership working that's already in evidence in terms of working with people like CAB, Advice Portsmouth, national organisations such as Settled, in terms of providing advice to EU citizens to help with the impacts of any changes that might arise because of the Brexit. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Colleagues, are you happy with this report, colleagues? Okay, thank you very much indeed, Paddy. Let's move along to item 7, the role of member champions. On page 43, Paddy, this is you again.
It is indeed, thank you, Leader. So this, in essence, is just talking about what the role of member champion should be, links back to a standards paper protocol that was agreed in 2010. And I think the bit that we're suggesting as a significant change is a requirement that member champions should report back to council on an annual basis of the activity that's taken place in the last 12 months.
Okay, colleagues, I haven't got any hands raised. Are colleagues happy with this report and the suggestions there? Okay, thank you very much indeed. We now move to item 8, which is the clean air zone, and we have 4 colleagues who want to speak on this. Councillor Claire Rudy, Councillor Cal Corkery, Councillor Judith Smythe, and Mike Dodson. I know Mike Dodson's deputation came in late, but because Appendix 1 wasn't available on the website for the whole period, I think it's only fair that we allow his deputation late because he didn't have the data for him to be able to scrutinise early enough to be able to put this in correctly. So I think it's a maximum of 6 minutes each, I think. So if we go in that order, should we do the introduction first from Hayley and then do so that we know kind of where we are, and then do the deputations after that? Is that all right with everybody? Is that all right? Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Judith, hello.
If we could put Mike Dobson's read out deputation first, it might save you hearing things twice from us, because I certainly was going to draw on that, and it'd be much better to hear it from him first, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, fine. Happy to do that, Judith.
And, you know, I think I'd like to go before Cal, because Councillor Corkery, because we've worked together on this to avoid repetition.
Very happy to do as you wish. So I think in which case I'm going to do the order Hayley to introduce, followed by Mike Dobson's written deputation, followed by Claire Rudy as a group leader, followed by Judith Smythe, followed by Cal Corkery. So Cal, I'm sorry, you're at the end of the queue, for which I apologise. Let's start with Hayley. Are you around, Hayley?
I'm here, yeah. Thank you.
Lovely.
So the report makes recommendations for amendments to the Class B Clean Air Zone following a public consultation in August. The Clean Air Zone will be delivered in Portsmouth per the requirements of the ministerial directions issued to PCC to make improvements to air quality in the shortest possible time. The need for the Class B Clean Air Zone was established through the development of the local air quality plan outline business case that was submitted to central government in October 2019. The public consultation was therefore not to seek public opinion on whether or not they want a clean air zone, that's already been established, but to seek views on the design and operation of the clean air zone per the requirements of the Transport Act 2000. The consultation sought views on a number of issues. However, the report to Cabinet focuses only on the issue of boundary changes for this meeting. As was clearly indicated in the Clean Air Zone consultation materials, any proposed changes through the consultation can only be taken forward if technical air quality and transport modelling shows that the changes don't make any negative impact on achieving compliance. Modelling has therefore been undertaken to inform the recommendations in this report. In considering the recommendations in the report, members are reminded of the legal requirements faced by PCC to bring concentrations of nitrogen dioxide to within legal limits in the shortest possible time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hayley. That's very helpful. Hayley, I think you're now going to do read Mike Dobson's deputation out. Can I? Is that right, Hayley?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So it may be slightly longer than 6 minutes, but let's see how we get on.
Okay, no problem. Before I start, I would just say that Mr. Dobson's provided his representation in a PowerPoint with reference to some images and diagrams. So I will try and do Mr. Dobson's hard work justice and do what I can to read that out online for you. So to begin with, There's a number of key points that Mr. Dobson wants to raise. He has suggested that Portsmouth City Council's air quality modelling is based on inaccurate and unrepresentative readings of air pollution. If accurate and representative air pollution readings were used, these would change the baseline data used in the clean air zone modelling. He suggests that higher baseline levels would lead to a more stringent clean air zone. He suggests that the council's modelling to date is very detailed and precise, but is wrong. Because of the complex linkages between different packages and elements of transport, public health and air quality, all of the council's air quality plans are invalid, not just the latest proposal to reduce the area of the Class B clean air zone. Mr. Dobson has raised a number of issues with regards to the height of diffusion tubes. So for those that aren't aware, diffusion tubes are the monitoring tubes that are used to monitor the levels of nitrogen dioxide in the city. Mr. Dobson refers to DEFRA guidance and states ideally samplers would be placed at breathing height, but in order to reduce theft of tubes, it is recommended that tubes are placed at a height of 2 to 4 metres. Concentrations of nitrogen dioxide typically decrease with height above street level, so tubes placed some metres above street level may lead to underestimate the actual concentrations to which the public are exposed. The inlet sampling point shall be between 1.5 metres, the breathing zone, and 4 metres above the ground. For security reasons, the inlet should be greater than 2 metres, though it is recognised that low sampling heights better reflect the ambient conditions encountered by members of the public. Mr. Dobson suggests that the receptor tube's location in air pollution hotspots and JACU targeted exceedance locations. He says that if a tube was mounted 55 centimetres lower at the recorded height of 2 metres, the nitrogen dioxide reading would be significantly higher than the 50.38 micrograms per cubic metre that is recorded at the Alfred Road diffusion tube. Air quality modelling using accurate readings at 2 metre height would give more pessimistic assessment that would require more stringent measures. For example, a citywide Class D clean air zone. Mr. Dobson has asked, why has PCC mounted the receptor much lower than the 2 metres stated in reports and used in the air quality modelling? This is a low footfall area, so minimal likelihood of vandalism. A plausible explanation, he suggests, has the tube been deliberately mounted much higher than declared by Portsmouth City Council in order to underreport the levels of air pollution? Is PCC guilty of knowingly submitting false information to government? So that first statement is about Alfred Road, where the diffusion tube is mounted at a height of 2.55 metres. The next location that Mr. Dobson discusses is Queen Street. In this location, the diffusion tube is mounted at a height of 2.3 metres. Again, Mr. Dobson refers to the same guidance about placing samplers at breathing height between 2 to 4 metres. And again, the fact that concentrations typically decrease with height above street level, so could be an underestimate of actual concentrations. Again, Mr. Dobson is suggesting that the location of this tube is leading to unrealistic NO2 diffusion tube. He said diffusion tube readings. He's saying that the tube is 80 centimetres higher than the breathing zone and 30 centimetres higher than declared in PCC reports and air quality modelling. He suggests that this leads to an inaccurate assessment because of poor analysis techniques leading to flawed conclusions and bad recommendations. Next, Mr. Dobson discusses Lord Montgomery Way, where the diffusion tube is located at 2.3 metres. This slide has some pictures on it, so I will try and describe for everybody what Mr. Dobson has explained here. He has suggested that the nitrogen dioxide tube in an air quality management area and an air pollution hotspot is under reading because it was mounted 30 centimetres higher than the specified height. And on his image, he shows the location of the diffusion tube attached to a drain pipe at the side of the building. So to summarise some of the key points about the locations of those diffusion tubes. Firstly, Mr. Dobson suggests there's a lack of clarity. He states that Portsmouth City Council modelling results do not give clear details of the baseline assumptions made. There is a lack of quantified information shared with the public on the following issues: the magnitude of the expected modal shift from driving to active travel, by how much will vehicle kilometres reduce, and how much will this reduce air pollution. He's suggesting that Clean Air Day data in 20...
Hayley, that's 6 minutes. If you've got any conclusions from Mr. Dobson, do you do them now, or do you think we've got the sense of his view?
Yeah, I think the sense is the main issue is the diffusion tubes are not mounted at the right height, leading to inaccurate data. And then he goes on to talk about the way in which optimism bias has not been treated correctly in the modelling. Those are the main issues that Mr. Dobson's faced. And
Hayley, just for our help, I understand that the government guidelines suggest the height they should be mounted at. Are the ones that we're talking about in Portsmouth mounted within the correct height as defined in government guidelines?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Dobson might not like it, but they are at the correct height as set out by government.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Let's move on to Councillor Claire Udy, Group Leader for Portsmouth People's Progressive Party. Claire.
It's Portsmouth Progressive People. Thank you, Leader. Dear members, I'm writing you writer because I thought I had to submit it, so I'm reading to you today concerning my views on item number 8 on the agenda, the Clean Air Zone. I know this has been around a year in the making, since I've really known about it, and I appreciate the effort that officers have gone to, and I wish to thank them for that. I'd also like to thank Mr. Dobson for his deputation today, which was certainly eye-opening to say the least, and I hope it is gratefully noted by the council today. I want to speak to you with 2 of my council hats on today. So I'm going to open up as Chair of Licensing and have some checks. I know there have been some deputations, some representations on the consultant from the taxi trade. At present, the licensing office and other officers in the council have been working together to establish some common ground. It is clear that we're moving towards a potential policy change which could potentially move the no age requirements of cars, which was an amendment tabled by the leader of the council last year before I was chair. Instead, it is hoped to be proposed to align with the Euro emission standards for cars. This would mean that all vehicles would be compliant and not just 2/3 of the current figure. We've also had access to a little bit of cash to hopefully upgrade cars which need it, with a focus on wheelchair accessible vehicles. As you know, an electric London black cab costs around £60,000. This is unattainable for us, but hopefully there is funding to significantly help. I understand that the hands of the council are tied slightly, as we won't have any funding if we go hardcore, as it were, in having more types of vehicle in a zone. I also understand that when the council is subject to lobbying attempts by all sorts of different people and groups. However, I think the administration is becoming a little bit scared of alienating a voter group that probably wouldn't even vote for them anyway. I want you to be radical with your decisions when it comes to climate change. You've been given a glimpse of what could have been achieved at the beginning of lockdown and for the betterment of the city and residents. This is why the representations in the taxi trade, unfortunately, are a bit moot and uninformed, because I'm comfortable to say that vehicles should be compliant by the bringing of the zone. Now I'd like to talk to you in my Charles Dickens hat on. I'm not the right of the ward member, of course. You know full well that air quality in Kingston Road is illegal, and Fretton Road is on the precipice of that. So what have you gone and done today? You've catered to the needs of the university and other people, and you've taken it out of the zone. The majority of respondents have communicated that they're happy with the zone and all they would like it larger. So why have you cut it down? In the words of Hayley today, it is imperative to get the air quality within legal levels, and you're going to direct traffic to literally one of the illegal areas, the Kingston Road. And to say that I'm grossly disappointed is a complete understatement. Deprivation in my ward already leads to a significant decrease in the age in which a person lives, and the air quality adds to that sandwich of despair. You've let my residents down and those in Fratton and Nelson who also suffer with a disproportionate level of deprivation. All three of the wards are also home to a huge number of families whose lungs are young and being choked. Let's face it, if the air becomes any more toxic down Fratton Road or Kingston Road, there's a huge chance that I'm going to start developing feelings for it. At the moment, you literally have the clinical lead for Asthma UK, Dr. Andrew Whittemore, saying that you've got this wrong, and I assume you have deputations today, and I thought there would have been alongside mine. I have asthma and I take a powder inhaler daily, which they give to people that suffer from COPD. I want to walk through my city, as many others do, without feeling the strain on their lungs. I can tell you the last 10 years since I moved out my childhood home in Fratton, when I walk back there, it's awful and you notice, and I'm a reasonably fit person as well. I understand that you've been put in a position to implement this, and it seems almost hypocritical when just 100 companies produce 71% of global emissions. Hybrid and electric cars are still ever so expensive. We are being punished for what, quite frankly, for something that we haven't done. It doesn't mean that we do nothing, though. I believe it to be a minor cost to us, and I hope to have your word that you will do to get taxis up to scratch for the zone. I also want to know why we've pandered to the university so hard when the majority of our residents not only want this clean air zone, but crucially need this. I'm not catastrophizing, but this is a matter of life or death, a matter of shaving years of the lives of people, a matter of potentially saving millions of pounds of money for the NHS because we aren't treating those with issues surrounding air pollution. We can tackle air pollution in our locality and make the air a little bit easier to breathe and improve the life chances for our residents in the wards of Charles Dickens, Fratton and Nelson. In comparison, we've seen scores of people oppose Aquin for the loss of allotments and green space, but rarely when we come to this clean air, rarely any people when it comes to this clean air zone today. I believe this is way more important as well. I kindly ask you to put Fratton and Kingston Road back in. If we still have the time to get the cash from government or implement it, then at least I ask you to defer today, to go back to the drawing board and see over this. Our residents will thank you, and so will their children. I want to hear their laughter when they play outside and not their coughing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. So I think Judith, you're next. Councillor Judith Smythe.
Thank you very much, Gerald. You can't see, but I'm actually kneeling down in front of my computer. I feel so strongly about this subject. I commend what Councillor Udy said, and some of the passion that she had, I hope will be reflected in what I want to say. I'm really at a loss to understand how and why the Cabinet is considering reducing the size of the clean air zone, especially as I understand the DFER have apparently agreed to fund the previous scheme. And I really, really want to persuade you to change your mind. First, you're overriding the results of the public consultation by weighting, it seems, the responses of certain groups over others and ignoring the albeit small majority of those who responded for a larger clean air zone. And as I understand it, specifically more than 2,000 people responded to the consultation, and only 1.5% of respondents asked for the clean air zone to be reduced, whereas 847 people, 39%, asked for the size of the zone to be increased or left as it is. Some of those who were against the clean air zone were taxi drivers, yet the majority of taxis used in the city are compliant with low emissions requirements, and many more are planning to replace old and polluting vehicles with modern, cleaner vehicles, as Councillor Udy said. In short, you appear to have put the views of 31 business owners and taxi drivers and university people ahead of the views of 867 residents. This will surely greatly reduce the confidence that people have in consultations of any sort, and completely undermine the notion of an effective consultation in which enough ordinary residents can actually influence policy making. Not only is this wrong for the clean air zone, but it will completely undermine the public consultations that are now underway. Why on earth would anyone spend time filling them in if they think that you'll just override the results? What's the point of consulting if you don't take any notice of the will of the people? And then I just want to go on a second point. You're taking out of the clean air zone, on your proposal, the Fratton Road area, Kingston Road, which is where there are many, many more people living and walking about in the streets than in the far western part of the zone, Alfred Road, for example. Hardly anybody ever walks down there. Worse, there's the question of displacement of traffic that will choose not to go through the smaller clean air zone and it'll be displaced from the commercial road area and will use Kingston and Fratton roads and add to the congestion there, reducing air quality even more to the considerable disadvantage of vulnerable people and children, as well described by Councillor Udy. Third, and lastly but not least, we all know well and have heard in this chamber, in this virtual chamber we've got here now, the absolutely compelling case for reducing air polluting traffic in Portsmouth. Dr. Jonathan Lake spoke clearly on the effect of dirty air on children and vulnerable adults at the full council in September, just 4 weeks ago. And it was clear, because I went and had another look at it, from the live video streams of the meeting and the supplementary papers produced by cabinet members, one by yourself, leader of the council, that the cabinet strongly supports the green agenda and is strongly committed to improving air quality. So what happened to that? Here we see again how great the gap is between by what this administration says sometimes and what it does sometimes. And I don't want to take away from how good the previous paper on advice on solar panels and all that is. You've got some really good track record in some things, but in this area, this particular incident, which I think is one of the more serious things to deal with, the gap is enormous. Here we just it's shameful actually, and I'm really feel appalled and sad by this. Lives will be lost. Children will grow up with life-limited bronchial injuries, which will limit their lives. And I don't know how you can even think of reducing the size of what is already, in my view, a tiny clean air zone. So please change your minds today and give us all in Portsmouth some rays of hope when we draw attention to air quality on this Thursday this week, as this is the UN's International Clean Air Day. And on the website, there are lots of inspiring stories of English cities who've made great decisions to clean up the air we breathe and improve the health and well-being of local families. And they have broken eggs to do that. They have done difficult things. There are groups of people wedded to polluting vehicles who are not happy with that decision. But good governance on the green agenda requires grasping the nettle and just doing it. And let's, there are lots of inspiring articles on that website and lots of conversation will be just this Thursday on the UN International Clean Air Day. And it will be really good to see Portsmouth featuring in that as one of the most forward-looking and ambitious cities in this way. And this, I think, this particular issue, I'm more upset about this and disappointed about this than almost anything else in my career as a councillor. And I really hope you can change your minds. I can't see why you couldn't, and I can't see why you go through the expense of creating such a tiny clean air zone when there'll be such an enormous effect on residents, poorer families particularly, living around and walking around, and the schools and everything else in the Kingston Road and Fratton Road area. So please change your minds, either by deferring or changing your minds today. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Judith. Councillor Cal Corkery. Cal.
Thank you, Chair. I'm proud to represent and live in Charles Dickens wards, but clearly it's an area which faces many challenges. The area scores highly on almost all deprivation indexes, but especially with regard to health outcomes. There's a shocking gap of 10 years between the male life expectancy in Charles Dickens compared to the wealthiest area in the city. And of particular relevance, in the midst of a deadly pandemic, people who live in the area also have much more likely to suffer from respiratory illnesses. For all those people living with respiratory illnesses, or worried about their children growing up around so much pollution. A clean air zone is exactly what the doctor ordered. So then it was with some considerable concern that we learned of the intention of this administration to remove the eastern boundary of the ward from the planned clean air zone, an area which is well known to be one of the most congested and heavily polluted within the city. The assessment of air quality report presented to the Cabinet member for Environment and Climate Change Decision Making meeting on the 23rd of July made specific reference to dangerous levels of pollution on Fratton Road. It said that average nitrogen dioxide levels on that road are 41.88 micrograms per cubic metre. Sorry, Lisa, could I get you to put on mute? I can hear feedback from you. Thank you. The legal limit is 40 micrograms per cubic metre, and it should be noted that the figure reported for Fratton Road is an average, so while we don't seem to have information relating to variance, it seems fair to assume that levels will be even higher at peak times. And let's also recall that the Fratton Road Kingston Road corridor is within an air quality management area and has been for some time. According to the American Lung Association, nitrogen dioxide causes a range of harmful effects to the lungs, including increased inflammation of the airways, worsened cough and wheezing, reduced lung function, increased asthma attacks, greater likelihood of emergency department and hospital admissions, and there's also new research that warns that nitrogen dioxide is likely to be a cause of asthma in children. And on that last point, it is worth noting the number of schools and nurseries in close proximity to Fratton and Kingston Road. I've identified at least 10 schools or nurseries within 500 metres of the area, including some which have playgrounds just a few feet away from the road. The ONS has found that long-term exposure to air pollution may well increase the risk of death from COVID-19 by as much as 6%, and that air pollution could be a factor in explaining why people from BA-ME backgrounds suffer more from coronavirus. Anyone who is familiar with Fratton Road in particular will know that the majority of the people who work in businesses on it, and I suspect the majority of the customers who use those businesses, are from Asian, Arab or Black ethnic backgrounds. This is an important point that needs to be addressed, but doesn't seem to have been included in the qualities impact assessment relating to this decision. So why then, in light of the overwhelming public health case for including Fratton and Kingston Road in the clean air zone, is the administration proposing to take those areas out? Now, usually in order to answer this question, we would look to see what it says in a report. These reports conveniently contain a section entitled Reason for Recommendations, where the rationale is set out. This report details the consultation responses where 77% of respondents either agreed with the size of the zone or felt that it should be made larger, compared to just 23% who thought it should be smaller, and a very small number, 1.5%, who felt that Fratton Road and Kingston Road specifically should be excluded. The report states in the recommendations on section 10.1 that the reason for this recommendation is to approve the removal of Kingston Crescent and Fratton Road from within the clean air zone boundary to address concerns about access into or out of the city via the M275. So that is the rationale contained within the report. It is quite remarkable then that the administration seems to have taken a completely different line about the reasons for this decision. Councillor Vernon Jackson, the leader of the council, has said on this issue, quote, "The advice that removing Fratton Road meets the requirement of the scheme means that this is what we will be expected to do." Councillor Pitt, the deputy leader of the council, has said, quote, "Ultimately, the officers of the council are acting within strict guidance to come up with the smallest zone that will achieve compliance, because that is what the government has ordered them to do. The option of designing something else does not exist." Councillor Stagg, the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation, has said, quote, "Unfortunately, opposing it will have no effect, as DEFRA has decreed we create the smallest possible zone that their modelling shows will make us compliant within the year." So all three Cabinet Members have made more or less the same argument, that they have no choice in this matter, the decision is being dictated by government, and there is no alternative. This argument is problematic for a number of reasons. One, there is absolutely no evidence provided to support it. Two, it is not referred to in the report, nor supported by any of its content. As a quick aside, I would assume that the rationale for making decisions must be contained within the reports presented to a decision-making meeting. I'd be interested to hear the legal view on that. Three, it directly contradicts the advice I have received from council officers. Officers have told me that the position is that DEFRA have already approved the inclusion of Fratton Road, Kingston Road and Kingston Crescent as part of the outline business case, and that the administration could legitimately and without any known risk of losing government support or funding continue to include those areas within the planned clean air zone. So what is the actual rationale for this decision being made? It seems to me that it cannot be that the council has no choice in this matter. So is it then, as the report states, to address the concerns of the 1.5% of survey respondents who requested these changes? To sum up, this is bad governance. Decisions being made and the reasons for them must clearly be laid out in the published information relating to decision-making meetings, so that the public can fully understand what is being done and why, and engage with the process on that basis. This is bad consultation. 77% of survey respondents either stated their support for the proposed zone or felt it should be made bigger. To then push through a decision that reduces the size of the zone undermines the legitimacy of the consultation process and the public's trust in it. This is bad policy. The council has declared a climate emergency and stated as a priority the intention to tackle the climate crisis, increase air quality and improve health outcomes. The decision before you today does none of those things. Ultimately, this is a bad decision. It's bad for air quality, bad for local people and bad for our city. I appeal to members of this cabinet to properly scrutinise the decision before you today and vote against any recommendations that remove from the clean air zone some of the most polluted roads in the city. Thank you.
Sorry, back off mute. Thank you very much indeed, Cal. That's very helpful. Colleagues, we're now open for debate. Can I start? I think I might start, and then I've got Councillor Dave Ashmore has indicated. So, colleagues, we've got a very difficult decision about the clean air zone. I think we are different to some others because we've tried to look at this in a holistic way. When the government proposed this, we suggested that there were several other methods that the government could use to try to improve air quality that would be significantly better. So we asked the government about whether they would support a scrappage scheme to get rid of old polluting cars because they're the ones who we need to get off the road, and the government said no. We asked the government if they would look at making sure that the investment into walking, cycling and public transport in Portsmouth would be at the same level as in London councils. And the government said no. We asked the government if they would look at supporting bus passes for everybody to try to encourage modal shift off private cars and into buses. And the government said no. So the government are pushing for us just to have one method of trying to reduce air pollution. And our problem with them is that they are dealing with places where their modelling says there's a problem. And we have to produce something that meets what their modelling says is the problem. We might not just agree with them about where that is, but we have to address that. Now, I think I agree with people who talked about the consultation being a difficult consultation. One of the questions that people have said is that, like, a clean air zone covers the whole of the city, and that's what 38% of people said. Now, we know that we can't give that. We know we're not allowed to do that. So this is going to cost £25 million to bring in Portsmouth. And I think, personally, there are many ways in which we could have improved air quality using that £25 million in a much, much better way than a clean air zone. Just think of what we'd be able to do in terms of investing in walking and cycling and public transport, but the government won't let us. So we got a consultation that the government sets down and rules about how this has to operate, which the government sets down. And we have to operate it in exactly the same way as we have to operate with systems in planning that we don't agree with, and so many other things. So personally, I think we're in a difficult place. I know councils in Bristol and Sheffield have used the pandemic as an excuse to delay bringing in their clean air zones. Now, both of those are Labour councils, and they've chosen to delay bringing in their clean air zones. I think we have to have more courage than that and more realism than that, and realise that traffic levels are going back up to where they were before, and therefore we shouldn't use the excuse of the pandemic just to try to push something past an election where people in and the administrations in Bristol and Sheffield think this will be unpopular. I don't think we should do that, because I think we have to value people and value them correctly. But this is about trying to find a balance between what is the right thing for the environment and the right thing for local businesses as well. So I think one of the very big problems out of this is this discriminates against shops in town centres. This says that if you're a shopkeeper and you've got a shop on Commercial Road, some of your lorries bringing in stuff to your shop are now going to be taxed to come in there. But if you're in an out-of-town location at Burfields Road or at Hedge End, you won't have to pay that. But those places are only really accessible to people going by private cars. So the government's clean air zone is encouraging people to go further in private cars and create more pollution. It's nuts. And likewise, one of the options here in the paper is that we say we exclude the Whitelink terminal from this. Now, the Whitelink terminal draws in heavy goods vehicles and buses and coaches through the city, and I think we have to be realistic that this is going to hit that trade. But what's going to happen to that? That trade's not going to go to the Isle of Wight. It'll be diverted either to Southampton through their city, or down to the Lymington and Yarmouth connection and drive across the whole of the New Forest, and then drive the whole way across the island. So many more miles by lorries, and it'll increase air pollution, but it just will move that air pollution. So I think this is really ill thought out scheme, but we have to do what the government has imposed on us. And we must remember that this is a government imposed scheme. So we cannot do a clean air zone across the whole of the city. We're not allowed to do that. Whatever people have asked us, we can't do it. And I think it's a real problem in a consultation that people have been given the impression we can do something which the government just won't allow. We also need to be realistic about how long this is going to be in. We're going to introduce this in 2021. According to the figures from the government, by 2022, we'll have got to compliance. If we hadn't have brought this in, it would have been got to compliance in 2023. So in 2022, when we got to compliance, we'll have to take the whole thing out again. So I think this is really badly thought out, but the government is saying we have to do this, and I don't think we should hide from bringing it in just because it's inconvenient. My personal view is we have to get the balance right, and the balance of trying to make sure that we protect local jobs and local services, particularly in areas of deprivation, means that Fratton Road and Kingston Crescent are really important in terms of jobs. And I don't want this council to be a place which is an enemy to creating jobs for people who live in the poorest areas of this city. So it's a close call, but I think it is the right thing to do to keep Whitelink within the zone, so that we don't create something that brings that discriminates in favour of lorries and coaches just because they're going to the Isle of Wight. But I think in terms of Fratton Road and Kingston Crescent, that's a sensible thing to come up with in terms of making sure that we support business. And the advice from the officers is that will mean that we will hit compliance with the Clean Air Zone in 2022 at exactly the same time as if they're in. I think there are lots of other things that we need to do to improve air quality, but that's not what the government is interested in. The government is only interested in this thing that will hit people, particularly on lowest incomes, really hard. So I'm going to start with Councillor Dave Ashmore as the portfolio holder. David?
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, this is a really serious topic. It's public health, people's lives on it. Alternatively, this week on social media, I've been called, beholden to the car lobby, and alternatively an anti-car liberal hippie. Make of that what you will. I don't drive. I don't own a haulage business. I'm not a taxi driver. I'm just trying to be someone here, looking at the evidence, looking at what the government's telling us to do, looking at what's going to actually improve lives, rather than what do you call them? Gestures, empty gestures. So let's look at what a clean air zone is and what it isn't. It isn't a project that cleans all of Portsmouth, Portsea Island and the outside there, the north of the city up. It's basically a government backside covering exercise to stop getting sued by Client Earth. That is how it came about in the first place. It's not from any kind of seeing of the light of we need to be more environmentally friendly, we need air quality lowered, we need to be a greener nation. That's what it came about. It forced its hand. This isn't about wider improvement of air quality. It is only concerned with 2 roads in the city, just 2. I think that's Alfred Road and Church Street, isn't it? That's the only 2 that this clean air zone is concentrated on. That's why, the boundaries that everyone's arguing about and discussing here are like they are. That's why that nothing's concrete. Nothing's been told you have to, implement this to clean all the roads. Just those 2 there, and it's only focused on what they call compliance. If we want to go beyond that, I think, as has been mentioned in the deputations, as has been mentioned by the leader, as has been mentioned by Haley there, if we want to go beyond that, make it a wider zone, make it a harsher zone, we'll have to pay millions for that, which is millions we don't have, because we won't get the funding for it under the current rules that the government have set out. We can only work with the framework we've been instructed to. So we have to consider, as we're going to have this clean air zone, we need to ensure we have the funding for it. And we also need to go where, look where the data for this type of CAZ leads us. And as the data in the report does show that compliance will be reached, without Fratton Road and Kingston Road in it, that means that's on the table too when coming to address this. I mean, that's how the government framework works. If we put Fratton Road, if Kingston Road and Fratton Road are in there, it could reroute, again, as the leader said, it could reroute traffic around Fratton Way, it could lead it into Milton, central Southsea. It could, we could justifiably be accused of shifting the pollution from one area to another without concentrating on that modal shift away from these polluting vehicles and away from private cars. So that means in all the discussions and reports and talks and plans about the clean air zone, we've got to keep worrying about what reaches compliance according to JACU, which is the government branch that's sorting this out, in the shortest possible time. We can't go beyond that. And this isn't a party political ideological thing against clean air zones. The leaders mentioned other authorities that have delayed it, I think. And I think down the road there, Labour run Southampton, they've avoided it as well because they didn't see it as being effective, to bring to improve their air quality. We can't do that here. But if Councillor Corkery mentioned the annual air quality status report. It shows that while there are exceedances, we are on a right trajectory. As has been mentioned again, we are on the trajectory to be compliant by 2023 without a clean air zone. So we're looking to what can bring compliance sooner, but also, this word compliance just sounds so bland. It sounds so unambitious. It's like you're going to hit that ceiling there. So long as we're below it, it doesn't matter. We can trundle along. We don't want to do that. We need to look at longer lasting solutions. We don't want to hit compliance for a couple of years, have the CAZ taken away, and then it's all up for grabs again. That is not a modal shift we're looking for. That is not going to be a cleaner Portsmouth we're looking for. That is not going to be, I wouldn't be doing my job if we were just looking to hit compliance and trundle along and rest on our laurels. That isn't it. We've requested from central government funding for things that would improve that modal shift. The leader has gone through them. Things like subsidised bus travel, massive increase in funding for cycling infrastructure, because that's going to be a heck of a lot better for people health-wise as well, in other health and well-being methods. We've looked for the ability to transform taxi fleets into electric vehicles. All of this, we need to reiterate that today. We still want that. We still think that would be more effective. We still think that would be more permanent. We still think that would be a much longer lasting solution. We want permanent air quality solutions across all of the city. And I make no excuses for wanting that. As for Fratton Road being in the boundary, I also want to put out here that it's also at the moment with the future high street bids, it's also being considered to do it up, to make it a low traffic neighbourhood, and that is something we're looking for. That would make it a much more permanent way of cleaning the air, a much more permanent way of clearing that congestion, a much more permanent thing for the air quality there, a much more holistic way of achieving this, so it appears naturally and will go on forevermore, hopefully. And a clean air zone, a lot of the emails that have come to me, and I haven't been able to get through back to all of them, I will attempt to this week. And of course, a lot of people are emotional about this, a lot of people are concerned about this. But a clean air zone, as the one that has been imposed on us, doesn't exclude cars. It does not exclude private cars. Even the most heavy polluted ones, the oldest ones possible, it doesn't exclude them from the areas. A clean air zone along Fratton Road, Kingston Road, wherever, will still allow the most polluting private cars. It will only affect the most polluting HGVs, buses, coaches, and taxis, private hires there. That's a fraction of the vehicles causing the damage. We've got to look at it, and it doesn't even address particulate matter, because that comes off things like tyres and brake pads. So that's still going to be an issue as well. Things that we have done, like that have helped in the areas along the AQMA bits, along London Road now, is things like bus retrofitting, to make it Euro 6 compliant. That's helped a heck of a lot there. That's helped public health. And trying to join it in with also what the leader said about businesses, jobs, local tradespeople. We don't want to burden, the less well off, who have to then pay for their business to continue or for their jobs to continue, while richer people and big business can just simply pay to pollute, because that's not a permanent answer either. That's not an ideological answer to cleaning our air up. I've mentioned before that the clean air zone, it could cause a rerouting of pollution. It can cause the less well off to lose out financially, as well as it doesn't exclude cars. So people with medical conditions still won't be any better off through a clean air zone alone. And let's not beat around the bush. The reality of the issue is there are too many cars in the city, and that's what we have to address. We have to address modal shift, and we have to demand wholesale change from the local level to the national level, right up to beyond that. So,
David, can I bring you to a close? You've been on for more than 6 minutes, and I think we need to be fair to everybody.
I am very passionate about this, leader.
I know.
I make no ashamed of that.
But even so, let's move on. Matthew Whittington.
Thank you, and thank you for Dave. Thank you for the deputations. I appreciate them, and thank you for the comments of both Dave and Gerald. I would like to put it into, as I always do with these things, put it in terms of people, and especially thinking about the health and well-being of people. And let's be absolutely clear on this. A clean air zone is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. A clean air zone will not achieve what we want to achieve for this city, which is air quality improvements for the whole of Portsmouth. This is merely a box-ticking exercise by the government, by the Conservative government. They are not interested in the health and well-being and the air quality in the whole of the city. They are interested in ticking a box. That is all this is about. We have asked for intrinsic things that will change this city forever, to have funding for a scrappage scheme for cars, to have investment in walking and cycling, and for subsidised bus travel for everyone in the city. That would make more difference than the clean air zone will do in the 1 year, which is very possibly how long it will be in. So this is a SOP to this city, and it is not going to address our issues. Whether Kingston Roads, London Roads, Fratton Roads, Kingston Crescent, whatever, whether they're in or not, it will have minimal impact. All this is going to do, this clean air zone, all this is going to do is shift non-compliant vehicles outside it. So again, whether that's onto whatever's outside it, it will create bigger problems, bigger air pollution problems outside. But let's also be honest about this. It's only going to affect, so only 15% of the vehicle journeys in this city are going to be potentially affected, and only a percentage of those that are non-compliant will actually be affected by this, because the government has said you can only have a Class B air zone. So I've actually come up with some different recommendations, and I think these are more clear. They actually state the situation we're in, but they also say to government yet again, give us what we want that will really change the health and well-being of people in the city, really stop air pollution, rather than this SOP of a clean air zone. So I would like to read those out now. So recommendation 1 is that the Cabinet notes the consultation responses. Recommendation 2, Cabinet asks the government once again to fund the practical solutions we asked for to tackle air pollution. Car and van scrappage scheme to get the older, more polluting cars off the roads. The same level of funding to support public transport, walking and cycling as councils in London get, which is 11 times what we get in Portsmouth. Half-price bus passes for all citizens to encourage people to leave their cars at home. These would make a real lasting difference to air quality and people's health and well-being across the whole of Portsmouth. Recommendation 3, if the government will not accede to these reasonable, sustainable requests, then the clean air zone should be implemented within the boundaries as in the original consultation document, but removing Kingston Crescent, Fratton Road, Fratton Roundabout and Holbrook Road roundabouts due to their inclusion resulting only in pollution being shifted to the east and south. Cabinet recognises that any clean air zone will only be in place to secure compliance for 2 roads, Halford Roads and Church Street, as per the government guidance, and is not intended to address the air pollution, air quality or people's well-being issues in the whole of Portsmouth. That is absolutely the situation we're in. And to think that this is some kind of congestion charge, to think this is some kind of magic bullet that will solve air pollution issues is just utterly mistaken. And I'm really, really sorry about that. If we could do things like a clean air zone or some kind of thing across the whole of the city, if we get funding for that, that would be great. I think it would make some difference. But let's be honest, we want to stay difference in this city. We want to get to a position whereby our clean air issues are not an issue long term, but we are going to have people out of their cars. We're going to have a more healthy and well-being environment in the city. And yet the government are giving us £25 million to put something in for about a year or maybe 18 months, which is then going to be taken away as soon as we hit compliance in 2 roads. And then where are we going to be afterwards? We're going to be nowhere. Apart from the things we're already doing, as Councillor Ashmore has said and others have said. So I reluctantly accept a clean air zone coming in, not because I don't believe in charging non-compliant vehicles, but because I don't believe that this clean air zone, as proposed, will make any real difference, any sustainable difference to the air quality issues in the city and therefore the health and well-being. Because I think as soon as it goes out, as soon as we lose the funding for it, we will again have the issues, because we need to have sustainable things in place. We are doing our best with that. We are investing in that. We are bidding for money on that. But I would ask the government once again, give us the money to invest in sustainable solutions rather than something that's going to be in for a year to 18 months, which is not going to be sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. I have Lynn Stagg, Lee Hunt, Darren Sanders, Steve Pitt. Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief because a lot of things that I wanted to say have already been said. I totally agree with what Dave has said, Dave Ashmore. If there was evidence that including Fratton Road and Kingston Crescent in the CAZ would have any significant positive effect on air pollution, I would oppose these recommendations without hesitation. But there isn't any evidence or insufficient evidence. But as a council, we can and will address air pollution in these areas without having them in the CAZ. Just because they're not included doesn't mean they will be ignored. It doesn't mean we will do nothing about it, about reducing air pollution in those areas. But we need long-term solutions, not short-term fixes. And this is why it's in our local transport plan, our strategy, lots of things that to address right across the city, not just in these areas. However, I will say we as residents of Portsmouth can help ourselves to reduce NO2 emissions by using our cars far less than we do. Instead of using them every day, maybe just once or twice a week, or cutting out if you've got two cars and it is possible to get rid of the second car to do that. So there are lots and lots of ways in which they can do it. The other thing, if possible, if it's affordable, and I know this isn't true for lots of people, but when you replace your old cars, which are polluting, trying to replace them with less polluting, low emission vehicles. Now I realise that this is costly, but for those who can, it would help. So what we need to do is to change the way we live in all sorts of ways. This isn't just about travel, but it's the way we live altogether. That is going to contribute towards cutting down air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for being quick. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's been very interesting, hasn't it, today? I want to reiterate what Councillor Winnington said. This is a hammer to crack a nut. And it's really worrying to hear some of our colleagues who've come on to make deputations today asking us to put businesses and trades like electricians and plumbers and other ordinary people around our city who want to move about and do their business when they're already under the cosh right now as a result of COVID regulations, to see some councillors in Portsmouth wanting to make life yet harder for people to earn a living. You know, the tradespeople, the people who are the poorest, they want us, some of these councillors actually want us to do a whole citywide controlled zone, which we have decided not to do. And we see the difference between the pragmatic, sensible, small government that we're doing here in Portsmouth by doing trying to do light touch regulation in order to keep people working and to allow them to earn money for their families rather than to penalise them as they move around our city. We see the difference between, you know, we are taking tougher action here in Portsmouth than in Labour-run Southampton, where they had decided not to do a controlled zone. And that was welcomed, believe it or not, members, by the Freight Traders Association, who said about Labour-run Southampton City Council that Labour-run or the council recognised a controlled zone was not the most effective way to achieve improvements in air quality. We hope other cities, presumably Portsmouth, learn from this decision and adopt the same common sense approach. So our colleagues in the Labour Party, they say one thing in Southampton and something completely different in Portsmouth. And this is sheer opportunism by them. What we are interested as Liberal Democrats in this city is getting the best for the people who live and work here and want to move about their own city. So this controlled air zone is surgical. What it does is it targets the most dirty, the most polluting vehicles coming into our city, thereby reducing carbon emissions, which those councillors have been talking about today on behalf of their residents. So what we are doing is tougher than Labour-run Southampton. We have listened to everybody, and we are taking a pragmatic approach about this controlled air zone. It's quite right that it probably won't be here for a long time because of all the other things that we've been doing in this city, some of which have been talked about today about reducing carbon emissions. So we're delivering on our pledge. We are delivering a controlled air zone. It might not be as big as some of the politicians and some of the lobbyists in this city want, but we represent the whole city and not just those people. And we've listened very carefully to them. So we're going to target the dirtiest vehicles, the most polluting vehicles, and we've listened to everybody. And as I say, down there the road in Southampton, that city has decided not to do a controlled air zone at all. And in this city in Portsmouth, we are. So I just don't understand how calm our Labour colleagues have decided to come here to attack us for doing something that their party doesn't want to do in Southampton. That's the end of my leader.
Thank you very much, Lee. Councillor Darren Sanders.
Thank you, Gerald. You'll be delighted to know I'm not going to do speeches, but just ask questions.
Shall we move along? Oh, all right. Sorry.
I want to ask questions of the officers because some things have been raised here that I haven't picked up before. So I just wanted to check. So Hayley, if Councillor Winnington's recommendations are agreed by the Cabinet, does that mean that there is nothing that can be done to improve the air quality down this key corridor? Things like changing traffic phasing, improving traffic lights, all that sort of stuff. Is that just impossible if we don't keep this in the clean air zone? Hayley.
Sorry, it was slow to
That's all right. I know it's a shock being asked questions. I know.
Yeah, we can certainly undertake a feasibility study to look at that kind of thing in terms of optimising traffic signals. We're already undertaking a study to look at the signals at Alfred Road Junction at the junction with Dockyard at the naval base there.
Okay, because I think I do agree with what colleagues have said around this is a really, really bad corridor. I walk it quite frequently, and I think doing nothing is not an option. But if there are things that can be done, because the second bit was the notion from colleagues that Labour colleagues that the clean air zone would sort this. So, but the leader has said that effectively this zone is only in place until we achieve compliance, which may be a year after it's brought in. Is that correct, Hayley?
Yes, it's the point at which we as PCC and the central government are confident that compliance has been achieved and maintained. So there's no defined length of time it has to be in. We just have to have the monitored data to prove that compliance is maintained.
So your expectation is that compliance with the zone will, and this is for what, Alfred Road, I believe it is. This isn't for Kingston Road, this is for Alfred Road because of the strange government rules. Is that correct?
The focus is on Alfred Road and Commercial Road as the two locations, but we have to ensure compliance is achieved across the city.
Across the zone. Okay. So assume we get to 2022 and this zone achieves what it wants to achieve and we have compliance on all the roads and everything else. What happens?
We submit monitoring information to central government and then we wait for the okay from them to say that it can come out.
Okay, and in your experience, how long does it take normally for them to say, okay, you're fine, you don't have to do anything else, please remove the zone. Are we talking years?
Yeah, this isn't clear yet, as none of the clean air zones have gone live yet.
Right, so they don't know, basically. Okay, but it's a professional opinion that, you know, this zone won't be in. If we achieve compliance in 2022, this zone isn't, in your judgment, this zone won't be in 2025, will it? Or 2024, will it?
Yeah, the current modelling suggests it would be out before then.
Okay, so we're talking. So this is essentially 25 million quid on something that will last 24, 25 months. Have I got this right?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. You're not selling the zone to me. I've got to say. I have to say. So this is 25 million quid we could spend, right? What sort of things could you do to improve transportation in the city with 25 million quid on something that may last longer than 2 years?
Yes, there's plenty. Yeah, there's plenty of things.
But what's the top three?
You could invest in cycling infrastructure. You could invest in public transport corridors, like we're doing through the Transforming Cities Fund. There's things you could do around parking. So there's plenty of ways you could spend that money.
Okay, please don't mention parking. We have 4-hour council debates on parking. If we all give up the will to live after about 5 minutes. So essentially, even if we decide not to include these 2 roads, is this particular area today, there are things that could be done that could last longer than 2 years in terms of reducing air quality on these roads. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The 25, I'll leave parking because it'll just create a row, and I don't want rows here. But there are various things we can do to get people onto public transport, to improve the cycling infrastructure, get more people cycling, hopefully make the Eastern Road a better place to cycle along, with the 25 million quid. In your judgment, yes?
Yes, certainly. That could, complement things like the 56 million we've just got for the Transforming Cities Fund.
Which is a fantastic achievement and a highly ambitious agenda, and congratulations. So my final point is then that this will only be temporary, and that effectively once we achieve compliance, it all goes away, and we're all back to where we're sort of back to where we started. Is that correct in terms of congestion, if not necessarily in terms of compliance?
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily be back to square one, because as a result of the clean air zone, you expect some level of behavioural response in terms of people changing mode or cancelling their journeys. But like you said, once it's out, what happens after that?
Okay. I know somebody said Aquin earlier, which is always cheers me up no end, but to me this is an answer in search of a question, this clean air zone. But such is life. Hayley, thank you very much for your patience with me.
Thanks.
And Hayley, can I add one more question from me? Is air pollution in the city going up or going down?
So the annual status report that regulatory services produce every year shows that there's a general trend for it reducing.
So air pollution is getting better in the city, not worse.
Yep, that's the general trend.
Thank you. Okay, finally, Councillor Steve Pitt.
Thank you, Leader, and Hayley, if your indulgence, a few extra questions for you as well. And I noticed that colleagues from other parties, in particular Councillor Smythe, when it was addressed earlier on that this was solely to do with the 2 points of exceedance in terms of the CAZ's use, in practical use, it's to achieve compliance on the Alfred Road and Church Street junctions. They are the 2 areas that JACU are requiring us to introduce a zone to address. Is that correct?
The locations are, it's not quite Church Street, it's the top of commercial road at the junction with Church Street.
But the two sites marked in the report. That's fair to say, so anybody watching can check afterwards. Okay. Is it true to say that the number of people who responded to the consultation, only 10% of those actually live within the area of the proposed CAZ?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so just over a couple of hundred people, which is disappointingly low for an area where you'd expect there to be more interest from the local population. Is it also true to say that 90% of the businesses who responded, who are within the proposed boundaries of the CAZ, believe that it would have some or a large impact on their business?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So in terms of what the leader was saying earlier on about the economics, etc., there are big concerns from the business community. Is it also true that the point of the consultation was for the council to understand mitigations to the proposed boundary in order to minimise any negative economic impact on the city?
Yes, that's right. As I said in my introduction, it wasn't about is there a zone or not, it's how do we design the zone.
Okay, so when we move specifically to what appears to be the main bone of contention, Kingston Road and Fratton Road, and I completely get the issues, and you know the Lib Dem office is in Fratton Road, and standing outside that for some fresh air in inverted commas is not that pleasant because it's right near a crossing with lights, and therefore there's constantly traffic there who are not complying with our request to cough cough turn your engine off, which would also help the air quality in Fratton Road if people did that. However, in terms of the way the CAZ's been designed, is there any evidence or indeed intent for air quality improvements on Fratton Road or Kingston Road to be the outcome of the implementation of the CAZ directly?
Sorry, I don't understand.
So in terms of what the CAZ's trying to achieve with the compliance at the Church Street junction, the end of Commercial Road, so let's say, and Alfred Road, are we trying to achieve any improvement on Fratton Road or Kingston Road themselves as part of the CAZ, or is actually the air quality of that part of the wider issue around the rest of the city, and it was only being included to try and improve compliance, the speed of compliance at Alfred Road and at the end of Commercial Road?
Oh, sorry, I see what you mean. Yeah. So as part of the local air quality plan, the ministerial directions, we have to achieve compliance in the shortest possible time, specifically at the 2 exceedance locations, but also ensure we don't cause an exceedance elsewhere. The issue on Fratton Road, it's monitored as part of the national air quality objective, but that is a slightly different requirement than we're looking at with the clean air zone. The clean air zone, the legal requirements are from European directives, whereas the NAQOs are a national level, and there's no requirement under the NAQOs to make improvements in the shortest possible time. We just have a responsibility to work towards meeting these national objectives under the air quality framework. So there's two slightly different bits of legislation.
And I thought it was really important to tease that out, that we're talking about two potentially different things. So is it true to say that if our objective here is to improve air quality on Fratton Road and Kingston Road, the CAZ is to a large extent a red herring in that?
Yeah, potentially its objective is not focused on that road.
No. So there are things that we could do as a council to improve the air quality on Fratton Road and Kingston Road, including the lobbying that we are doing to government, that is likely to be significantly more effective than its inclusion in a CAZ which has a different objective.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm coming to the end, but I think it's really important to tease these things out, because it's absolutely clear to me that this administration is very worried about people's health and the air quality in the city. What it doesn't want is to get dragged into an argument over the effectiveness of a CAZ on a road that is not the target of the CAZ. Now, for those people who live in Milton who are worried about overdevelopment at the former St James's Hospital site, when we know that those junctions are either at or close to exceedance in terms of the peak traffic flows that those crossings can even handle, Judith Smythe made a really important point earlier on, and she said, if people want to avoid the CAZ and you remove Fratton Road and Kingston Road, you will send that traffic up Fratton Road and Kingston Road. Therefore, if we include Fratton Road and Kingston Road, it is absolutely for certain that we're going to send that traffic elsewhere, because it's got to go somewhere. So surely it's better to take a holistic view here of what we want to achieve for the whole city, to lobby the government to give us the money that they flaming well should give Portsmouth to do what it needs to do. We have a unique geography here. We are like no other city in the UK, and yet time and time again, the government ignore us. I think demanding the same level of funding as Transport for London get is absolutely crucial to this, colleagues, because it's not acceptable to say that Portsmouth, which we know in terms of its demographics and its social structure, is very similar to many of the towns and cities in the so-called now Tory red wall up in the north of England, where they're intent on investing money and quite happy to ignore Portsmouth. And it's unacceptable. We've got to get to a point here where we're looking at the whole city. So I would plead with Labour colleagues, let's not go down a blind alley over two roads that are not even the focus of a misthought out CAZ imposed on us by the government. Let's link together and through your Member of Parliament lobby this government to give the proper funding to Portsmouth that it should be doing, instead of having a bum fight over a sideshow, because it's not helping anybody. We agree with you. We want to improve air quality for the whole city, not just two roads that tick a box to stop the Tory government getting sued. So please, let's work together and focus on that, and not disagreeing over very minor issues which are going to have no impact that's evidenced in any way, shape or form to benefit those two roads that you care about and we care about, and where Councillor Ashmore is a ward councillor and cares very much indeed.
Colleagues, that's the end of the people I had speakers for. We had a proposal from Councillor Matthew Winnington from some amended recommendations. Jane, have you got sight of those, or do you want those after the meeting?
I would like them after the meeting, please, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. So,
I'll just say, I'll if we agree with them, I'll send them directly to Jane when we've done so.
Okay. Thing from the last meeting, Jane, can we make sure that people's deputations are recorded in the minutes? Because I know Jerry Brown was worried that we'd missed him out. So it's important that everybody's contribution is recognised. So, colleagues, there's been a proposal put for an amendment by Councillor Matthew Winnington. The rules are that if people object to it, they need to say. So, anybody wish to object to Councillor Winnington's amendment? No. Okay. Thank you. That then, and I think that is then that subsumes all the other recommendations. And so, colleagues, with that amendment, are colleagues happy with the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, colleagues. We now need to move on into the agenda, and the next thing is, in terms of the confidential report, to move the exclusion of the press and public. I'm going to keep the rest of the meeting in open session as long as colleagues don't refer to the confidential appendix. But colleagues, are you happy for us to move into confidential session for the sake of that confidential appendix? Thank you. I think everybody is. Then, in terms of the next report, Tristan, are you introducing this?
No, Leader, you have Natasha McIntyre-Hall, the Assistant Director of Strategic Developments, to lead.
And Natasha, is this your report?
Yes, it is.
So Tristan has put his name on it, and he has nothing to do with it. It's typical direct. But anyway, Natasha, thank you. I know Cal wants to have a word on this, but do you want to do a short introduction?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to keep it really short. Obviously, you've got an awful lot of information in that report in front of you. Really to say that we've been progressing TIPNA really nicely over the last little while. We've got to a point where we've designed a concept master plan with a sort of iterative process looking at the numbers as well. We're at a point where we believe that we've got a financially viable solution for TIPNA. So we're coming to you guys really to give you a bit of a feedback in terms of what's happening in terms of design and public consultation, and then ask to be able to continue through to planning, which is programmed in for 22. with appropriate gateways, such as the production of the OBC. We are also requesting that a sum of money, £8 million, is made available from the city deal in order to be able to progress that. And finally, we are asking that Assistant Director for Property and Investment, Tom Southall, is able to complete the
Let's take off mute. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cal, Corkery. Cal.
Thank you, Leader. You'll be pleased to know I've got a bit less to say about this one.
Well, it's a very important subject, Cal.
I've got a mixture of some comments, but also some questions, really, just to tease out a bit more information, if I may. So I wanted to start, I guess, with the history of the Tipner regeneration project, because this is one of those things in Portsmouth that's dragged on over decades. There always seems to be new plans coming forward, and not a brick has been laid in terms of new houses for local people. So I would be interested from officers, really, to understand a little bit about their perspective on the history, what has caused the delays, and how can we have confidence that this time actual progress is going to be made. Linked to that, I guess, really, is looking at what the report says about what has been spent to date on this project. I note that £4.6 million of the city deal money has been spent on master planning consultant fees. Now, I know you've talked about a concept master plan has been produced. I would just be interested to know what that amounts to, what has been received in return for the £4.6 million, and I don't know whether you can answer this or not, but does that represent good value for money? Because it seems I haven't seen any master plan. I've seen one kind of 3D image from a distance. Presumably more exists than that, but I would just be interested to know, as I say, what services have been provided in exchange for that money. Just some more general points, and I guess it's also a query around who is going to be leading on the residential side of this development. Now, clearly, there's a couple of different routes that could be taken. It could be a local authority-led housing regeneration project, or it could be somewhere where the local authority sees its role as laying land, assembling the different bits of land, and then providing, if you like, a blank canvas with some ideas for a developer then to lead on. I'd just be interested to know what direction we're going in terms of whether it's going to be which of those models is likely to be pursued, or maybe it's a third one that I haven't considered. In terms of the affordable housing, is the kind of my priority and what I primarily want to see happen on Tipner. I note that the report talks about expecting 30% as a minimum. Now 30% is obviously the minimum that would be expected on a private sector development within a city of this size. However, my position would always be, if this is public land, if this is a council regeneration project, then why can't we aspire and actually put that target much higher? I mean, a figure that I would maybe pluck out thin air, but just to make the point, is why aren't we saying 50% is going to be the minimum? And then if we can get more, then we will. And if that's an issue, then maybe it needs to be revisited. But it just strikes me that in the history of council regeneration projects, I would be surprised if there is an example that can be pointed to, and do correct me if I'm wrong, of a project that at the start of the project stipulated a percentage of affordable housing, and then by the end that had actually increased. Because it seems to me all the evidence is that actually the reverse tends to be the case. So I think we need to start off with an ambitious and a radical target, and then work towards that throughout the project. That needs to be the kind of baseline minimum. And then if that needs to be revisited, then let's do so. But let's have that discussion in a kind of public forum like Cabinet. I think that is all I wanted to touch on, really. Obviously, I won't bore people with the kind of the importance of building new social housing and the need really to maximise as much as possible on the site, because I think that's been well documented and people will know from their casework and the issues of the city. But it's really, yeah, my query is around the history, around what has been received for the money spent, but also crucially around this figure of percentage of affordable housing, and whether actually we could be looking to place that higher at this stage as an ambitious target to be working towards, rather than just accepting the minimum. Thank you.
Thank you. Natasha.
Okay, thank you for the comments there. yeah, the history, this project has been going on an awfully long time. And I think one thing we've got to be careful when we look back, it's very easy to underestimate all of the work that had to go in to make this a reasonable solution going forward. So I'm very lucky. I've been here for a couple of years, and the whole time that I've been here, we've been moving this forward. We've been looking at design. We've been figuring out ways of going forward. But predecessors had to make sure that there was policy in place that allowed us to be able to do this. So that's one of the reasons why quite a lot of this has taken some time. It's about understanding the land ownership, the quantum that we were able to go through, and making sure that we have policies that can support it. So I understand that. I understand the concern about delays, and I am really confident that we have a way of moving forward. Our concept design, as it says in the report, is circa 3,500 residential units and 9 hectares of marine employment. This is a robust scheme with a good community, and we have a great programme for moving it forward. We've got a terrific team on board, and we believe it's the right thing to do. The fact that we've managed to make it now so that we are confident in the financial viability, I think that really should give as much confidence as we possibly can that this is a scheme that's going to go forward. And if I didn't believe that this was the right thing to do, I wouldn't be pushing as hard as I am on it. In terms of the fees spent to date, I can't comment about the way that the fees were spent before we came on board in terms of value for money. Certainly, since we have been looking at this, everything has been tested, everything has been done through the framework. We are confident we have value for money, we have the right consultants on board, and that the master plan is exactly what it needs to be right now. In terms of who's leading on Resi, really interesting point. There are various different delivery solutions that we are considering, and we are consulting with the market at the moment, and we are looking also at supply chain management. There are various different ways, you're completely right, but we have one that works. In terms of the financial viability, we will use that as the starting point to then consider other options, how they could work, perhaps be more beneficial. So yeah, there are options there, and we are pushing that on. Hope to have that concluded a little later on in the year, and we will come back to you when we know that. And then affordable housing. Our wording was very. We deliberated over the wording quite long and hard over that, and we're looking at policy compliance as a minimum. Now, I completely appreciate your point. It's very rare for a scheme to go up, but it depends at what point you are introducing that wording. We will do everything that we possibly can to include as much affordable housing in this development as we can. But right now, for where we are in terms of the level of detail and where we are in terms of the financial viability of the scheme, it's prudent for us to make sure that that wording remains to give us the best possible chance of making sure that we have confidence that the scheme goes forward. As I'm sure you can appreciate, having over 1,000 affordable residential units is significantly better than not. So it's this iterative process at the moment of making sure that we have the ability to deliver the project, and then we will maximise the benefit to the community and beyond once we get there. I think that answers.
Thank you. And then I have a list of people. I got Councillor Steve Pitt, Councillor Darren Sanders, Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor and non-Councillor Chris Ward. He has not yet been promoted. So, Councillor Steve Pitt.
Thanks, Leader. I want to try and help Councillor Corkery a little bit here, because I do see quite a lot of your posts, Cal, when you're talking about the council's aspirations around affordable housing, etc. And you and I have got, excuse me, you and I have got a fairly long history in working together at times to try and hold developers to account and flush out economic viability assessments that we think are bogus. And, you know, I'm still frustrated that there are a couple that I pushed previous planning directors to challenge legally, and that we lost those cases because I still believe it was the right thing to do. So this is something I do take a close interest in. And I think the point here, and Natasha, you might be able to help me with a bit of clarification, the more we put in as an aspiration or even a declaration before we go to planning, the more we hamstrung ourselves, we will be hamstrung by what happens after planning. And this is where it often goes wrong, because sometimes some of the funding routes to deliver affordable housing or even social housing are dependent on being additional to what was given grant of planning permission. So, for example, if we went for 50%, I think it's fair to say that the chances of us adding to 50% would be low. By going in at 30%, which is policy compliant, if the planning permission is granted and subsequently there is a discussion to have with Homes England or a regional housing provider around delivery of housing association properties, then other funding opportunities open up that could potentially then increase the number of those affordable houses that can subsequently be included in the scheme. It's aspirational in the same way that with the recent Arundel Street application that went through. At an early stage like this, all of the focus is having a scheme which stacks up financially. Once you get to that point and you get planning permission, that's when you really gain flexibility around what you can do with the scheme. Now, you can be absolutely sure that Darren and I and Hugh will be doing everything we can, and actually the leader too, who would like every single property we ever build to be social or affordable housing, because that's what he always says to the directors. The reality is we need to find the right balance. Natasha's laughing because she's had those conversations with him many times, and what we need to do is find the balance that delivers a viable scheme so we hit our housing build targets, and we are also providing homes for people who don't need social and affordable housing as well as those who do, because we need homes for everyone, not just for those on the waiting list, but also to deliver housing in such a way that enables the waiting list to be attacked from both ends. Because if we only ever deliver social that meets the requirements of those at the what we call the sharp end of the housing list, those in priority need, all you do is keep replacing people at that priority need end with more people, and you never address the middle and the other end of the spectrum where those people stay on the list basically forever. So we do need the balance. We need homes that are available at local housing allowance rate. We need social rented homes. Absolutely we do. We also need genuine affordable in the policy description at 80% of the going market rate. And we also need private homes that people can rent to. Unless we get the balance right and we deliver a housing strategy that addresses all these things, and most importantly, unless the Tipner regeneration project gets the balance right and addresses all those things, it won't stack up and it will still be a piece of derelict ground in another 40 years' time. So as much as it would be lovely for purely political reasons to chuck in, yes, we want 50% social housing on the site, I can absolutely, with 100% confidence, tell you that is the fastest way to make sure no home is ever built on this site, and I would not support it. Natasha, if you've got any comments on what I've said, that's fine, but I'm not expecting you to.
No, I can clarify ever so slightly on terms of funding. For us to have the best possible chance of getting external funding from the likes of Homes England, we have to be able to show that there is that the scheme is not viable. So if we are able to balance it right now and make it viable with 50%, then the chances are our need for funding decreases. It's important to mention at this point that we still have a 5% gap in viability that we are assuming would be filled with Homes England or similar funding, and we're in discussions on that.
Okay, I have Councillor Darren Sanders, Councillor Hugh Mason, and Councillor Chris Ward.
Thank you, Gerald. I have 3 words about this report. About bloody time. It has taken more years than you can shake a stick at to get any progress at all. And I think one of the things that many councils forget is that this is just one part of a wide site. Last week, 3 words turned up that we thought never existed, which is the Tipner Regeneration Company, who own or oversee another part of the Tipner development, and no one has heard hide or hair of, except when they want to say, please don't extend the park and ride. I'm delighted that the City Council's regeneration team has got further since this administration took over in 2018 than it seems the Tipner Regeneration Company has managed in a decade. And that, I think, is hugely, hugely important. So firstly, congratulations, and I think we can make progress. I would agree with Steve that the key thing is to make sure that we've got a viable scheme which we can work on. It's the same principle as with the replacements for Leamington and Horatia houses, which are coming to council next week, which I hope all councillors will support, because it gives people a funding envelope on which to work. And I have bored everybody who will listen and will bore again by saying that the key thing is to get an envelope so we can get the rents down and the environmental standards up. And I'm interested that Cal didn't mention Passive House, which I think is unique, so I will. And I think one of the other, because I think it's not just about the homes, it's about the environmental standards too. And there are some key trade-offs. So, for instance, I know that Cal is very, very interested in a project, I think it's in Brent, which has been run with community project boards. And it's done by the team that is actually involved in taking forward the 2 tower blocks. It is not delivering 50% affordable housing. Indeed, it is having a row with the London Mayor because it isn't delivering 50% affordable housing. Yet that is what local people want. Similarly, the biggest passive house programme in the country, not the biggest passive house project because that's in Portsmouth, but the biggest passive house programme is York, led by a Liberal Democrat council. That is not achieving 50% affordable housing. It is much better to be cautious and work up than get burnt. I would also say that one of the biggest programmes of affordable housing in the city, which is at Kingston Prison, got passed by the planning committee with the grand total of 0 affordable hubs. But that was because of the bonkersly perverse nature of the government funding system. So it is much easier to start cautiously and work upwards rather than go in all guns blazing and disappoint everybody. Because I would say that this site has disappointed pretty much every single politician in the city at some stage over the last 10 years. And I'm delighted that under this administration, we have gone further in 27 months, it feels like 10 years, 27 months than some people have achieved for a very, very long period of time. I hope we can all work together. I hope we can deliver affordability. There will continue to be rows over what's affordable. For instance, the government's proposed new 5% deposit scheme, I could argue is affordable housing, but I suspect a few people won't. But I'm delighted that we've gone forwards, and all I can say again is about bloody time. And I'm delighted we're able to take it forwards, and I only hope the Tipner Regeneration Company emerge from hibernation again, not to slag off making the park and ride greener, but actually to do something. Thank you very much, Gerald.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Well, Leader, this has been a problem area ever since I came to the city, and I've been living here 50 years. The problem is that it's not a greenfield site. It's not a site that you can just move onto and start building. It's old industrial land, it's badly polluted land, it's low-lying land, it's flood land, it's marsh land. It's difficult land to do. This is why we have to be cautious about it. And I think that the 30% target which we have put for affordable housing is really, realistically, about as far as we can go at this stage. But the important thing is we have put this as a baseline. I don't think there is any councillor on this council, certainly not from Councillor Corker's party or from mine, who would wish to see it go lower than that, or would not fight to keep it at least at that level. So I think that we are where we are. I think we have moved a long way. If you look at section 4.6 of the report, what you can see is that we're at a point where we have to come up with a number of major decisions. Things like the full habitats regulation assessment. We've got to put out the schematic master plan. There are lots of things which we have got to do at this point. When we have done those, then it will be much clearer that to us that we will be able to build a little more than 30%, well, a lot more than 30% affordable housing. Because the important thing is that this area is an area which is the ideal for affordable housing. You're not going to build affordable housing on some of the other sites in this city. This one we may well be able to do so. But on the other hand, it is going to be costly. It is not a greenfield site. It's a low-lying piece of floodland. It's always been a mess. I need to stop it being a mess. I intend to stop it being a mess. And I trust I can look for your support, Cal.
Okay. Chris Ward.
Thanks, Leader. Just a few points of clarification, really. I think some of us will be long enough in the tooth to remember some of the history around the City deal itself. Certainly you will be, Leader, because I think you were one of the signatories to the City deal in the first place.
I was, and that was before my hair was white.
But you'll probably recall that one of the reasons we got the City deal is because the site's been derelict for around about 50 years, for 50 odd years. And the City deal itself, which is obviously a contract with government, assumes a programme well in excess of 20 years. So I don't think, I don't think to describe it as delays is necessarily accurate, but certainly it is intended to be a long-term project, and it was always expected that it would take some considerable time to get it to completion. The point about affordable housing, at the moment we have, and I'm pleased that Natasha mentioned the viability point, but at the moment we have an outline financial appraisal that's based on 30% affordable housing, but it also has a viability gap of over 100 million. That's not necessarily unusual at this stage of the project, and we have identified a number of potential sources to fill that gap. So we're working on the basis, and we continue to work on the basis, and that's how the recommendations are framed, that all the time that we have reasonable expectation of being able to close the gap and come up with a viable scheme, that the council will continue to expend money through this project. One final thing from me is that we have got a bit of an inconsistency in the written report, in that the recommendation seeks an approval of a release of £8 million to take us through outline business case into planning. But the references in paragraph 7.3 and 7.7 refer to 7.5 million. So I just thought I'd point out that inconsistency. Apart from that, that's all from me, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I'm very conscious this is an area of market failure. This is an area across the whole of Tipner where things haven't worked. This is an area where the council tried to buy land to build social housing from the Homes England, or what we sometimes call them No Homes England. And they would have been built by now and occupied if the government had allowed the council to buy it. But their belief in the private sector meant that it's been sold to a private developer, and nothing's happened yet again. So personally, I would like to commit us to 100% social housing across Tipner. But it's an area of market failure. It's where the market hasn't worked, which is why it hasn't been developed. And I think I need to be realistic, but I think we need to bear in mind that we're trying to build the future of the city, and people in the city need decent places to live at rents they can afford. And that's what we need to be working at. It's great if people can buy, but lots of people in the city just haven't got the finances to do so. And they should not be excluded from having somewhere decent to live to bring up their families. So I will work on every development we possibly can, try across the whole city to get the maximum amount of housing that local families can afford. And I'm pleased we're doing it. I would love to go above 30%, and hopefully we can, but I just don't know at this point committing to a higher figure will actually achieve something. And I want real homes for real families that they can afford, not just something written on a piece of paper. So, colleagues, I'm happy to propose the recommendations in the report. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry that this meeting has gone on for 2 hours and 20 minutes. James' photo is smiling. I'm not sure it's smiling or grimacing, but thank you everybody for your attendance and for all your work that you're doing on behalf of the people of the city. Thank you. Goodbye.
Peter will turn off the live streaming and let you know when it's been stopped.